Chapter 3. The Portal. The scientist led the group out through the mess building's front doors and across the wide turning circle where they'd stepped off the crew bus only hours earlier. Then he angled left. A narrow footpath cut through a cluster of mangrove trees, their tangled roots clawing at the neat geometry of the base. The air grew still, close. Then abruptly the grove fell away. A building stood before them, Romanesque, incongruous, crowned with a cupola, fluted columns framed double doors, and a ramp rose toward them like a ceremonial approach. "And you're thinking, what on earth is that doing here?" Taff muttered. "Exactly. Wait until you see inside." The scientist climbed the left-hand steps and pushed one of the doors open, beckoning them through. A central path led straight across the hall, flanked by flagged walkways. But none of them noticed the architecture for long. Their eyes were drawn to the far end. A Stygian black rectangle of nothingness, flecked with blue-white lightning, exactly like the one they had passed through, but now contained within a frame of black, red, and silver. The rectangle swallowed the light around it. A faint hum vibrated through the stone floor. The central path rose into a low ramp, and Rhod could easily imagine a wheeled vehicle emerging from the portal, rolling down the ramp, and out into the base. They followed the scientist closer, unable to look away. Taff swept into a theatrical bow. "Behold, the portal," he intoned, breaking the tension and even coaxing a smile from the normally sober scientist. "Behold the portal indeed," the scientist said, "and beyond it lies our own timeline. But I wouldn't be too quick to step through." He shot a warning glance at the payload specialist, who had taken an involuntary step forward. "Not unless you're interested in living. And growing old. In 1467 India." The payload specialist blinked. "History's not my strong suit, but I'm guessing we're not talking Bangladesh here." "Indeed not," the scientist replied. "Let me give you a quick breakdown of what you'd find. In 1467, the region now known as Cox's Bazar was part of the Arakanese kingdom. Not yet Mughal, not yet British. It was ruled by Buddhist kings, the Rakine Rajas, and served as a coastal frontier between Bengal and Arakan. It was probably called Panawa or Palanki at the time, a buffer zone between the Bengal Sultanate to the west and Arakan to the east. He glanced around. "Following me so far?" All nodded. Buddhist influence dominated temples, shrines, monastic communities. The economy was fishing, salt production, small-scale agriculture. The coastline was dotted with villages and forested hills. Urbanization was centuries away. The Mughals wouldn't reach this region until the 16th century. He paused. They were still listening, rapt. If you stepped through, you'd find yourselves on a humid, forested coastline of bamboo huts and Buddhist shrines. Fisherfolk hauling salt and dried fish. Temple bells echoing across the mangroves. And more than likely, you'd be picked up by the Raja's patrols, on elephant or horseback, and taken before the Raja himself. "You're beginning to sound like that's actually happened," Rhod said sharply. "Indeed it has," the scientist replied. "A mixed group of military and civilians decided they preferred to live out their lives in the past. They went through. Nothing technical or military made the transition. All of it fell away on our side of the portal. And since there's no record of such a group in the 15th century Cox's Bazar, we assume they were captured, killed, or simply died out without leaving a trace." "Nobody came back?" Keira asked. "It's a one-way trip," the scientist said quietly. "I know, because I was here when one of them tried." Rhod leaned forward. "And what happened?" The scientist's eyes flickered. "You'll remember that song from the 70s? Dust in the wind. Silence. The hum of the portal deepened. That's what happened. 6,000 years in a heartbeat. Dust in the wind, indeed." A subdued group left the portal building, moving quietly through the mangrove field. "I'm going back to join Stuart. Care to come along?" the scientist asked. Rhod nodded. "I think I will, thanks." Taff turned to Keira. "Fancy an evening stroll along the flight line? It's a beautiful night in paradise." Keira blushed again and nodded. "Why not?" The scientist exchanged a knowing look with Rhod. Jim, the payload specialist, decided to explore the mess's library and slipped inside ahead of them. The other mission specialists were keen to check that the shuttle was safely parked in its unplanned resting place, trailing behind Taff and Keira as they headed toward the soft sound of waves slapping against the beach. The wing commander was still seated at the head of the table, a fresh pint in hand. Rhod joined him while the scientist disappeared behind the bar, returning with another malt for himself and a new pint for Rhod. Rhod held up his glass, examining it critically. "One question," he said. "Where do all the supplies come from? Have you fellows built a brewery and a distillery since you arrived?" The wing commander smiled. "Hardly. Supplies arrived through the portal. Flatbed trailers like clockwork. We don't know how the collector knows what we need, but he does. He has no intention of starving us during our captivity. The same applies to the base itself. There was almost nothing here when Taff arrived, but after he took it upon himself to walk north along the coast for a few days, everything you see now was here when he returned. And refinements seem to appear every time new guests arrive." Rhod considered that. "So judging by the aircraft that have arrived the same way we did, I'm guessing there are about 1,000 so-called guests in your colony. And given that nobody is aging, most have decided to wait it out and return to their own timelines in, 600 years? The wing commander turned to the scientist. "You have not explained the disproportionality yet, Lionel." The scientist shook his head. "I thought they'd had enough for one day after seeing the portal." He turned to Rhod. "The thing is, although the portal links to our own time stream, time runs there 10 times faster than it does for us. So it's currently 1,467 on the other side, 562 years ahead of when you came through. But you'll only be waiting 56 years before you can safely step back. Young Taff, as our first intrepid explorer, has about 10 years less to wait. 56 years. Rhod let the numbers settle, dimly aware of the muted clink of glasses elsewhere in the bar, and the faint smell of the sea drifting in. "And that's the conundrum we all face," the wing commander said. "Lionel probably told you that a mixed group tried to start a colony in medieval India. How that worked out, we don't know, especially since the one returnee turned to dust the moment he stepped back through. And the historical record shows no sign of such a colony ever existing." He took a slow sip. "Others have left the main base. We sent a mixed scientific and military team to investigate a possible second portal in what would be modern-day southern China. We've heard nothing since. So to answer your question, there are about 700 of us here, resigned to wait out our time near the one portal we know for certain exists. We're in a gilded cage," Lionel murmured. "In a gilded cage indeed, my friend," the wing commander replied. A few hundred yards away, Taff and Keira were walking down the flight line. They had briefly joined the mission specialists who were clustered around the shuttle's bulky silhouette in the moonlight, heatedly debating how the hatch had been refitted so seamlessly that the orbiter once again presented an unbroken profile. Then they moved on, the sea murmuring to their right, passing aircraft after aircraft. Taff paused now and then whenever he spotted something he thought might interest her. They had just passed the imposing outline of the Panavia tornado when Taff stopped dead. "One of my personal favorites," he said. "Mine too," Keira replied. "The RAF Hawker Hunter. Classic 1950s jetlines." She swept her gaze along the sleek fuselage. It saw extensive service from the 50s through the 80s. The Suez Crisis, the Aden Emergency, the Indo-Pakistani Wars, the Sino-Indian War, and a whole string of Middle Eastern conflicts. The Six-Day War, the War of Attrition, Yom Kippur, Taff added, looking at her with open admiration. And even Africa. The Rhodesian Bush War, and later conflicts. "A woman after my own heart," he added. Keira smiled and glanced past him into the middle distance. "Just something of a plain nerd," she said lightly. "You'll know, of course, about the Hunter setting the airspeed record in 1953. Taff nodded. Over 720 miles an hour. Astonishing for the time. They continued to the start of the flight line. Taff's Spitfire stood there like a latter-day gate guardian, moonlight catching the curve of its wings. "There she is," Taff said, pride unmistakable. 14 kills, Keira murmured, counting the neat double row of crosses beneath the cockpit. "Not too shabby, eh?" Now it was Taff's turn to look embarrassed. He glanced up, moon slipping behind some low cloud. "Shall we wander back and see how the old fogies are getting on before it gets too dark to see where we're going? Don't fancy an unexpected paddle." They wandered slowly back along the tide line, and as they passed the Hunter again, it felt entirely natural when her hand found his. They turned at the now deserted shuttle and made their way together up the path toward the bright lights of the mess building.